Thursday after Israel's top court postponed its hearing on granting journalists independent access to Gaza. Since the Gaza war began in October 2023, Israeli authorities have prevented foreign journalists from entering the devastated territory, taking only a handful of reporters inside on tightly controlled visits alongside its troops. The Foreign Press Association, which represents hundreds of foreign journalists, had filed a petition in the Supreme Court seeking access for international journalists to Gaza. However, the court held its first hearing on Thursday, and the state attorney acknowledged that the situation has changed since the Gaza ceasefire and requested a further 30 days to examine the circumstances. Well, let's in fact listen to what one of the members of the foreign...
We're disappointed. We did not get what we wanted exactly. We were hoping that the court would order the state to open the border immediately. This is something that we have been working on and fighting for the past 2 years. We didn't get what we wanted, but on the other hand, the court did acknowledge that circumstances have changed. We're now in a ceasefire, and it's given the state 30 days to come up with a new plan on how to let journalists in there. Safety issues. Roughly 200 Palestinian journalists have been killed during this conflict. So we want to, and we appreciate everything they've done, but we think that the independence and having outside media it's going to give a fuller picture. The Army, of course, has given embed opportunities, escorts to reporters to go in there, but these have been very limited and highly controlled. So the more transparency, the more journalists doing their work, the better picture the world has of what's going on inside.
Xavier Abouie, the political analyst, is live with us from Amman on this big story. Xavier, what do you make of this ruling by the Supreme Court, something which has been called disappointing by foreign press associations? Obviously, access to Gaza has been further denied for a few days at least. More.
Well, let us remember that Israeli courts had a background of siding in many occasions with policies by the state that are illegal, including war crimes and crimes against humanity. We cannot claim that Israeli courts are courts that would bring justice under liberal Western standards that Israel claims to be. Now, regarding what the Foreign Press Association has been requesting, I think it's important to always highlight that for over 2 years, Israel has prevented foreign media from entering Gaza, but has also targeted Palestinian journalists. It's not just that over 200 Palestinian journalists have died. They have been killed, and there has been evidence of some of those journalists being targeted, being harassed, being persecuted by Israeli occupation forces. This is not something new. We also have persecution against journalists here in the occupied West Bank. We had the killing of Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh, which was one of the most important figures, not only on Palestinian, but also on Arab journalism. So when we're talking about Israeli obstacles for foreign media to present what's happening on the ground, it's not something new. And I think that's something very important to be highlighted at this stage.
All right, let me in fact quickly turn to some more news coming in this hour. Israeli military has launched a series of strikes on mountainous areas, allegedly targeting Hezbollah's military camp in eastern Lebanon on Thursday. According to Lebanon's official national news agency, Israeli warplanes launched a series of violent strikes on the eastern mountain range in the Bekaa region near the border with Syria. Israel has repeatedly bombed Lebanon despite a November ceasefire that brought to an end more than a year of hostilities with the militant group Hezbollah. Meanwhile, under U.S. pressure and fearing an escalation of Israeli strikes, the Lebanese government has moved to begin disarming Hezbollah, a plan which the militant movement and its allies oppose. Xavier Abouie, the political analyst, is joining us live from Amman. What do you make of this, these latest strikes, of course, in Lebanon, and what the fallout of them will be?
Well, it is certainly very bad news for people that are following the prospects of having a peace deal in the region. Why? Because this is precisely what Palestinians fear from the ceasefire deal in Gaza. In fact, dozens of Palestinians have been killed after the ceasefire has been announced by Israeli forces. And now what we're witnessing in Lebanon, again, is not something new. It's something that it has become very regular. Israel continues not only to attack positions in Lebanon, often targeting also civilians, but also they have taken 5 spots on Lebanese territory that they are occupying with military bases. That's not part of the ceasefire agreement. And I think it's important now that the US they have been putting pressure in order to continue with the process of a ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel to put real pressure. Let's never forget that even though the US is putting pressure now on Israel, are US weapons that are doing the job there for Israel to continue terrorizing people in Lebanon, in Syria, and also in Palestine. So in other words, I think this shows the fragility of the situation we are having now, and hopefully, and the international community will understand the urgency to act fastly in order to end this Israeli aggression against the peoples of the region.
Thank you very much, Xavier Abouid, for joining us. A Belfast court has acquitted Soldier F of murder charges related to the 1972 Bloody Sunday killings, in which 13 unarmed Catholic protesters were shot dead by the British Army during a civil rights march in Londonderry. The trial, which concluded on Thursday, 23rd October, found the soldier not guilty of killing 2 men and attempting to kill 5 others, despite an official apology from the British government in 2010 acknowledging the killings as unjustified and unjustifiable. Efforts to prosecute those responsible had failed until now. The court highlighted that Soldier F's defense relied on unverified military statements from over 50 years ago, with no independent evidence to back the prosecution's case. During the trial, Soldier F declined to testify, citing poor recollection of the events. The verdict has sparked anger, especially from Northern Ireland's First Minister Michelle O'Neill, who has condemned the outcome, emphasizing the continued denial of justice for the victims' families. Bloody Sunday remains one of the most defining and controversial events of the Northern Ireland Troubles. This is what the Bloody Sunday families represent and a brother of one of the 2 murdered civilians had to say.
Soldier F has been discharged from the defendant's criminal dock, but it is 1 million miles away from being an honourable discharge. Unlike his victims, there has been no declaration of Soldier F's innocence. Soldier F created 2 young widows on Bloody Sunday. He orphaned 12 children, and he deprived dozens of siblings of a loving brother. The Bloody Sunday families do not lay the blame for today's decision on the trial judge. The blame lies firmly with the British state.
Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, is joining us live from Minneapolis. Andrew, thank you for being with us on NewsX World. How do you view this verdict? Andrew, can you hear me?
Yeah. The verdict is not unexpected. Okay. There simply wasn't sufficient evidence. It's been over 50 years since this event. As the judge pointed out, memories fade, recollections are distorted by news coverage in the intervening 5 decades. It really turns, though, on a question of what is justice. Everybody wants justice. Is justice accountability? The British state and the British Army did things which violated basic human norms of justice and right conduct. They killed 13 innocent civilians who were merely marching for their civil rights in the context of a broader civil rights campaign. That's one definition of justice. The other one is fairness. This particular soldier being held accountable, quote unquote, 50 years after the fact on the basis of a problematic, shall we say, evidence. That's not fair. And so I think the judge had a very difficult task, wanting to deliver accountability for the British state and the British Army, but also fairness for Soldier F, a real live human being. And following his training as a British judge, he decided that there simply wasn't evidence to convict here on the basis of meeting the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. And therefore, he had no choice but to acquit Soldier F. Not to say that Soldier F was innocent in some metaphysical sense, but strictly in legal terms, he was found not guilty.
What do you believe the ramifications of this verdict are really going to be on public life and also the governments?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat the question?
What do you believe the ramifications of this verdict really are going to be on the public that's been following this trial with great detail, and also the government?
Yeah, again, I didn't catch all of the question, but I think it's important to look at the political implications of this verdict. So it was a legal proceeding. It was a court of law, and most people in the free world understand what that means. But it had political knock-on effects. It undermines, in the context of a peace process, which is now 30 years old in Northern Ireland, it undermines the trust of the Irish nationalist, sometimes referred to as Catholic community, in the British state. And that's going to undermine confidence in the peace process and maybe encourage some parties to restart or reignite the troubles, as they like to euphemistically call the conflict there. On the other hand, it has reassured people on the other side of that divide, the Unionists, the Nationalists, sometimes called the Protestants, who think that justice has been done. That no soldier should be tried for an act he committed under orders 50 years ago in a very complicated situation. So it's going to, and of course, First Minister O'Neill comes out of that Irish nationalist Catholic community. Of course, she's disappointed. Do I think that the institutions that have been built are robust and resilient enough to withstand this shock? Yes, I do. But there's no doubt we're in for a little bit of turbulence in the near future.
All right, Andrew, thank you for joining us with those details. Moving on now, in a historic moment, King Charles and Pope Leo have prayed together in the Vatican Sistine Chapel, marking the first joint worship between a British monarch and a Catholic pontiff since King Henry VIII's split with Rome in 1534. The service, which featured Latin chants and English prayers, took place under the famous frescoes by Michelangelo. Pope Leo, who was elected as the first US Pope just 6 months ago, led the service alongside Anglican Archbishop Stephen Cottrell. This momentous prayer service is a significant part of the state visit by King Charles and Queen Camilla to the Vatican, which celebrates the improved relationship between the Catholic Church and the Anglican Communion. Earlier in the day, the royal couple had a private meeting with Pope Leo. In the afternoon, King Charles and Queen Camilla will visit Rome's Basilica of St. Paul outside the walls, where Charles will be presented with a special seat in the apse.